Hi everyone, welcome to Pondering God. My name is Ron Bay Jr. and today's episode is titled Blind Faith. I love the definition of faith as described in Hebrews from chapter 11 verse 1. Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Sunday's sermon was from Genesis chapter 22 verses 1 through 18. One of the most difficult biblical stories for me to grasp. It tells the story of Abraham and his near sacrifice of his son Isaac. I can't imagine being willing to sacrifice my son like Abraham. What faith must it have taken for Abraham to do just that? Stopped at the last moment by God's intervention. The message was titled, Abraham, a Heart of Worship, but the faith aspect of the story is what resonated with me and got me to pondering. So, what kind of faith does it take to do what Abraham did? To come within inches of sacrificing his one and only son. Some would call it a blind faith, their words not meant as a compliment. A dictionary definition of blind faith is belief without true understanding, perception, or discrimination. In fact, Abraham, when God directed him to take Isaac up to the mountain to sacrifice him, surely had no understanding, perception, or discrimination of what he's being asked to do. He was likely confused, like we all would be. Are you sure that's what you want me to do? He might have asked. But instead, he obeyed God, having faith that everything would turn out okay. When asked by his son Isaac, behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham replied, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Not a moment's hesitation. Notice the Hebrew definition of faith I mentioned earlier, the conviction of things not seen. Although Abraham couldn't see or understand the outcome, he was convinced that God would provide. I recall a conversation I had many years ago with a friend. We were discussing child rearing and what the Bible had to say about it. I don't recall the specific verses we were debating, but I leaned toward taking God at his word, doing what he asked and trusting the outcome, where she felt like the verses being discussed weren't applicable to today and surely didn't mean what they said. At one point, exasperated with me, she said, So, you're telling me that God expects us to have blind faith? Exactly. For if we must first be able to see the outcome before believing, before trusting, or if we need to fully understand what we're being asked to do or believe, or if we have to have a guaranteed outcome prior to taking that leap of faith, then it isn't faith at all. The fact that Abraham believed God at his word is why this was written about him in Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. Then he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. The story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac isn't the only demonstration of Abraham's faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8 says, By faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. Abraham had no clue where he was being led, but still he believed and obeyed. In another example of his faith, Abraham was promised a son, even when he was old and childless, and having a child at his age made no sense whatsoever, but he still had faith in the one who promised, which makes his willing sacrifice of that promised son all the more impressive. And when God spared Isaac by providing the ram in the thicket, the angel of the Lord said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, indeed I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens, as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. Do you think Abraham understood that promise? Do you think he could imagine what it looked like? Him with an only son, to have his seed multiplied like the sand on the seashore, and the stars in heaven? And yet, he trusted God. He believed God. And his actions are proof of that belief. And that promise is being fulfilled even to this day. Hebrews chapter 11 is often called the Hall of Faith because so many men and women of faith are mentioned in it. From Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, And without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. Faith leads men and women to do outstanding things. As listed in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 33 and 34, faith describes those who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. And the list goes on. Would you have taken your son, like Abraham, up to the mountain? Would you have stepped out of the boat, like Peter, when Jesus beckoned? Would you have spoken up for your faith at the threat of imprisonment, like John and Peter? Would you have stood defiantly in front of the giant Goliath with only a sling and some stones, like David did? Would you have defied the king's edict, like Daniel, and prayed to the God of heaven under threat of death? These acts of faith didn't make sense, yet each of these men obeyed. God may not be asking you to do any of the things I mentioned, but you can be sure that when God tests your faith, it won't be an easy test, and your faith will be tested. Jesus asks us to take up our cross and follow him wherever he leads. He asks us to give him our life and trust him with our eternity, all without a crystal ball allowing us to see the future. Blind faith. What has faith led you to do? Where is your faith taking you? Do you believe God at his word? Are you assured of what you hope for? Are you convicted of things you haven't seen? Believing and obeying Jesus takes faith. Following him is proof of your faith. For we haven't seen him. We didn't witness the resurrection. He promised us that he prepares a place for us in heaven, a place that we can't see, and yet we're convinced it awaits. He promised us eternity with the Father. Do you believe? Have you obeyed? Faith is what allows us to put our eternity in the hands of Jesus, to obediently follow him, not because it all makes sense, not in human terms anyway. The world sees us as blind followers of a made-up deity. If someone accuses me of having blind faith, my response will be, sure, that's the only kind of faith to have. For the question isn't, in what do you put your faith, but in whom? Jesus summed it up best when speaking to Thomas in John chapter 20, verse 29. Because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are they who did not see and yet believed. Having a faith in that which we haven't seen, that is a definition of faith. Doing what the Lord asks without question, that is blind faith indeed. So, there you have it. Thank you for joining me this day. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like future episodes, just click the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Again, thank you for listening and have a wonderful, great day.